Missed it. All right, here we go. Now we're recording. Amazing. Yeah, so for those who don't know, Matt's a pretty interesting guy. He literally sold his house, moved his entire family and a lot of his stuff into an RV and is now traveling around the states, going from state to state, city to city, trying to explore life while still building an online business between himself and supporting his family. So a lot of people don't have that inclination to do a move like that. I think it's terrifying for a lot of folks, even for me. I could work remotely, but the thought of packing up all my stuff and leaving my friends is daunting. So I guess two-part question: how did you come to that realization that you even wanted to do this? And then how did you overcome the fear, which inevitably will occur when you're making such a massive change in your life direction?
Thanks, Lloyd. Well, actually, first, one thing is I didn't sell my house. I'm an entrepreneur, and so I leased that thing out.
Okay.
I like making money off of my stuff. So I leased our house out for about a year, and instead of it being a heavy payment every month, now it's actually making us money.
Nice.
So that's phenomenal. So you could make the quick buck selling the house, but in the long run, it's great letting someone else buy you a house. So that's been really this whole thing's been an incredible journey, and it really started with conversations between my wife and I, talking about this one thing that we've always wanted to do every single day. Each one of us always dreamed of traveling. We always dreamed of minimizing too, like just all the stuff that we had seemed to be smothering after a while. And so we decided, like, all right, well, what would life be like? I mean, we've worked so hard where we both have businesses that could be remote and we could work from anywhere. What would life be like if we actually did that one thing that we always thought about doing? And so we went about it in probably all the wrong ways, but we just started making movements forward. I mean, we hired some packers that helped us start organizing and purging things. And we found deals on everything. I mean, we were really like strategic about our costs on this and the budget. And we used connections in our local community, with the moving company. I knew the owner. He was a great person, helped us out. I knew the repair guy that helped us fix up our house, to get ready. I knew the guy that was our leasing agent. So I leveraged an entire local community, much like you'd leverage your LinkedIn network. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
It's a community. So having local community is almost more important than it is just having an online community. So it took this village to bring this thing together. And a lot of it was just based on this kind of idea of faith too, that this is going to work out. And no matter what, we're going to find a way to do this. If an RV was the solution, then that was going to be it. So we didn't know we were getting an RV probably up until the last week. We knew, we were out of the house already. Like, we had been out of the house for about a week and couch surfing. My son he's 5. He flew up to Maine to be with his grandparents. So it was just my wife and I and our 2 dogs. And we're couch surfing now. And it was crazy. Like, I'm 37, man. And all of a sudden I'm like, I feel like I'm back in my 20s living in apartments again. Like, it was really weird. But it was super cool too to only have like a couple backpacks worth of stuff. And it was like, this is all I have. Like, this is really cool. Like, I had more stuff in a 10 by 10 offsite, but that's it. I went from like a, 2,400 plus square foot house, to now all my stuff's in a 10 by 10 offsite. That's it. That's everything I own is in that box, And so when we finally solidified the RV, I mean, we were just looking for a roof over our heads. And a really good friend of mine who has just an amazing family. I mean, they let us use their 38-foot Class A motorhome. This thing's the size of a tour bus. It sleeps 10. I mean, it's a luxury house on wheels. I'm like, are you serious? I can't believe I'm using this thing for the next few months,
Wild.
And one, I'm terrified that you don't need a special license to drive this thing. It's insane. Like, it's huge. And I'm towing a Jeep. I'm towing a Jeep, man.
I couldn't even drive a normal truck. Literally, I've tried. I get nervous. I can't even do that.
I almost turned that thing into a convertible in New York by driving it under a bridge that was low clearance. That was terrifying. Almost didn't make it. So, but yeah, I mean, it was a long period of transition.
Right.
And there were a lot of stresses. Like, there were a lot of these weird little stresses, these things that weren't working out right, extra expenses. I mean, to tow my Jeep, I had to buy a new bumper. Like, it wasn't just like there was all these little things. that kept adding up. But eventually it's happening. And it was like these costs basically to almost start up a business. So in the long run, we'll be able to do this and the costs won't, will be very minimal and actually be helping us make money too. So it's been a wild ride. But I think this is the path most people won't take because of all the unexpected things. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of unknowns, but if people truly understood how creative and resourceful they are, I think you'd see a lot more people doing the one thing that they want to do in life. And my one thing for people that I coach people on is I'm not telling you to sell all your stuff and get an RV. I'm telling you to go after that thing you think about doing every single day of your life. Look, if you think about building a business every single day, but you do the opposite of that every single day, seriously, what's the worst that could happen if you actually pursued it? Like you fail, you'll get back up again. You'll figure it out. Best case scenario, you succeed and you live out your dream. So
Yeah.
that's what this whole journey is about. It's not about my one thing. It's about me encouraging other people to go after theirs. I'm a family with 2 entrepreneurs in it, with a 5-year-old son that we're homeschooling. And we're making it happen. And so many people out there said you can't do that. I think they're full of it.
Nice. If you had to point to like 2 or 3 things that made you feel that this was the right move, what would those motivating factors have been?
So 2 to 3 things that made me feel like this was the right move. The unexplainable way that things started working out. Like, almost like, I can't believe this is happening. It felt like every time I took a daring risk, out of like sheer faith, I was almost rewarded for it.
Yeah, completely.
Like when we put the house up for lease, we had faith that it would work out. We were a little late to the peak season, because we were just like, we're doing this. And it's like literally all came together in 2 months. It was literally like 2 months. Like we just decided we're finally doing it. Like this was fast. And it wasn't leasing. And we're in a very hot market in Austin, and we had a very high lease price on the place. And there were 3 other houses in our neighborhood. We were just, just about thinking about like, all right, what are we going to do here? And all of a sudden these amazing people showed up at our house and decided that they wanted to lease it. And it was just out of nowhere. Like, and we knew them. Like, it was amazing. Like,
Wow.
We actually knew these people. They didn't realize it was our house. And they just ended up being some of the nicest people I've ever met. And sometimes you wonder about the tenants that are going to be in your house. They're going to take care of it. It's like, no, I know that these people are probably going to take care of our house better than we would. Like, they're just amazing family. So that was just mind blowing that we'd get these people that we knew and would be loving on our house just like we would. And it was a nice family with dogs, and it just felt really good. And there's the same thing with the RV. I just knew, I prayed boldly about this thing, and I was just like, I know that this is going to work out. And lo and behold, by the last second, just as I'm being stretched, and all of a sudden there it is. And we have this beautiful RV that we're getting this experience in. We're going to bring the thing back by the end of September. And then we're actually going to be staying in a cabin that a really good friend of mine is letting us use for a while too. So again, it's just being creative, leveraging your resources, and, just knowing that there are really good people out there that want to help you in your journey and support you. So that's the best thing too. You just don't know what's possible until you ask.
It's pretty cool. You obviously have a lot of clients that you help overcome their fears and transition into jobs that they feel more fulfilled by. I'd love to even hear a story of one of the more memorable clients that you've had and where they were when it came to them maybe struggling, or when it came to them having a job that they didn't really love, and then how you were able to get them through and move into another role or another passion that they actually felt really, really pumped up about. I'd love to see and hear about the transition that you helped them achieve and how they got there.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of them, but one of the the first one that just popped up in my head was this photographer, super cool individual, very young, a real kick-ass millennial, and She's probably one of the best photographers I've ever met, but she wasn't doing it full time. Matter of fact, I saw that she was giving her services away a lot, doing free stuff here and there, trying to get her name out, like a lot of young entrepreneurs would do.
Yep.
I'm going to give my stuff away so I can get myself out there. And I just was like, no, you got to stop giving this away. And it's not like she was just doing weddings and, headshots, and stuff like that, like a lot of photographers do. Like she was doing like real stuff, like concerts and tours, like really cool stuff that's hard to get into, as a photographer, a very competitive space. But at the same time, she had this other part-time gig that was really paying her bills. It was more of a full-time gig, and she was doing photography part-time, but she wanted photography to be her full-time thing. The issue was it came down to fear. Like, this full-time gig is paying my bills. It creates safety and security. And it was going to be a scary jump doing something, that you would solely rely on yourself for, doing photography as an entrepreneur. But what we broke it down was we really looked at the full-time job and realized that it was probably costing her more than it was making her. Like, there was a ton of stress that was involved. She was always on call. So her schedule was unpredictable. So it made it difficult to book photography gigs because her schedule would be unreliable. And so, yeah, I mean, in the end, it was really costing her a lot because the transition is going to be impossible, it seemed like, to do the photography gig if she was still doing this other full-time job. So once we really broke that down, you could see how it was costing her more. And also just how she felt doing that full-time gig. That safety and security feeling, that illusion of safety and security that she had with the full-time gig was also coming to her at a cost. Like, yeah, she felt safe and secure, but she also felt stressed out and felt like, she wasn't fulfilling any purpose in life. So that wasn't really a great cost either for that. So we finally looked at it and said, okay, well, when's your last day going to be? She, it was a terrifying idea. I was like, look, if you quit your job next month, would you be able to fill your calendar with photography gigs? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm always in demand. And I'm like, great. Then start letting people know that next month that you're going to be available. That was terrifying. But she was game. She's like, all right, I'm going to quit on this date. And it was like probably a little over a month from the day we spoke. I said, perfect. So I sent her a calendar invite and said, here's your last day. And she was like, holy, like this got real. Like when she had to accept the calendar invite, it meant it was happening. And I was like, great, here's another calendar invite for your 2-week notice. She's like, oh, sweating bullets now, but felt excited because it was real. Like, you can talk about this stuff, but until you actually put a date on the calendar, it's not real. Like, let's get intentional about it. Putting it on that calendar makes it real. And the craziest part was the next day she got fired. What? And it was crazy. It was like that company, the person that she worked for just kind of knew, like they were encouraging her to pursue her real passion. They're like, look, we can tell like photography is really your thing and you need to pursue this. And it was really uncharacteristic for that, for this individual to be this way with her, but to be that encouraging, but they did. And all of a sudden she was pumped. Like, and here's the thing, if she hadn't emotionally and mentally prepared for that the day before, being fired that next day could have been devastating.
Yeah, for sure.
But now it was more like, this is it. Like, I'm excited. And that's what she's doing full time now. And she's been just fine. She's booked solid.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Booked solid. And so, I've had so many different examples, but that's one of my favorite ones because just to be fired literally the next day after we had the conversation was just mind blowing, But again, it's a testimony. If you weren't mentally and emotionally prepared for it, like, it could have been a devastating thing. And then it would have been really difficult to find the way forward through that process. But did it the day before, So my encouragement for a lot of people is that a lot of people won't make this jump until they're desperate, until their back is against. Most people won't do it until they've lost their job. Yeah. But you don't have to. And that's my whole thing. Like, I built my business through pain and suffering because I was disabled and broke, and I had to leave my job. And so, yeah, there was pain and suffering that I built my business from, but I did it. This whole journey with the one thing in the RV, I didn't have to. I didn't have to sell everything I own, but I did it anyways because I decided to take a risk.
Yeah.
I made a choice that wasn't out of desperation. And that's my encouragement to people. You don't have to wait till you're desperate, but either way, you can make it work. Whether you're desperate or not, you can do this.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because you can even look at the studies, and the studies show the people who take calculated risks, they tend to live happier lives. And I know it can sound a little bit woo-woo, but you can link having a very, very stable routine to a certain level of boredom that will accumulate over the course of your lifetime. And that directly impacts whether or not you're happy. Even for myself, I'll notice in my own mood that if I do the same thing, let's say I eat the same breakfast, I talk to the same people, I go to the same places, I go to my same workplace, and nothing changes for half a year, my mood noticeably goes down. So I've actually found that making it an actual practice to take calculated risks once in a while can dramatically improve your mood. For example, taking a solo vacation, right? It's not super high risk, and it's probably something you're going to be uncomfortable with, but once you buy the plane ticket, you now have no choice. You now have to go. You now have to actually survive and figure things out. It's a calculated risk. You decide to go to a new meetup group, for example, right? There's a lot of meetup groups in every town. These are small things that you can do, but it forces you to get actually out of your comfort zone. And then once you're there, you're almost forced to either sink or swim. You gave yourself no choice but to either adapt or die in that situation. Now, you're pretty much saying, take this to another level, right? Take the calculated risk of literally just jumping into that business that you've always wanted to build, or moving into that role that you've always wanted to, but you've been afraid to. That's like a sink or swim mentality. But once you take away all the other options and you force yourself to either adapt, most of the time you will. And it's really interesting that you can actually turn that into a practice. You can literally say to yourself, hey, once a month, I'm going to do one thing that scares me. I'm just going to put it in my calendar. I'm actually going to sign up for that class. I'm actually going to buy that plane ticket, and I'm just going to see what happens, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be transformational stuff. Look, man, when I created my own business, I finally had this flexibility where I could just be free about things. I'm going to sign up to volunteer in my community.
Yeah.
I always wanted to work in a record store, because I love music. So I had one day where I got to work in a record store. Like a buddy of mine owns one. He's like, hey, I need help today. I was like, awesome. I'm behind the counter selling records, talking about music. I was thrilled. Last night, I played a 13-song set at a local pub.
Nice.
I had my guitar and a mic, and it's great. So I get to take all these, and it's scary doing that kind of stuff, but it stretches me. And if I can stretch myself in these little areas, I'll stretch myself in my business, just like you're doing, with yourself. So, I mean, what's your most memorable calculated risk to date?
It's interesting. So what I like to do literally every single day, or at least multiple times a week, is take a lot of small micro risks, if you will. A small micro risk can actually just be any small thing that gets you a little bit nervous. So for a while, I was actually making it a practice to every single day meet 2 or 3 new strangers on the subway, because I had a long commute. And what I found was that the more I did these micro risks, my threshold for what scared me changed. Now I don't get nervous about meeting people on the subway. I get nervous about let's say going up to introduce myself to a group of 7 people now. So slowly over time, your threshold for what scares you just changes. And it's because you're just accumulating these life experiences over and over and over again. There was a point where I was really, really out there in terms of consistently doing things that scared me. And then it got to this peak where I had traveled to, I traveled to Switzerland on a moment's notice, literally bought a train ticket the day before, went there with no Airbnb booked, went there with no return trip, realized 3 days into my trip that I literally didn't have the money to afford a train ride back. And then I just literally hitchhiked back, which is insane because I was that guy waving my thumb around at the side of the highway, thinking to myself, if I knew I did this a year ago, if you told me a year ago that I was going to do this, I'd tell you that you're insane. There's no
Right.
way I would do this. But in that year, I had done little tiny things almost every single day that would scare me. Just small things. It's not as though I just went from being like just this hermit to hitchhiking the day after. It
Yeah.
literally took me a year of consistently pushing myself and doing tiny little things that advance my personality, advance my ability to deal with stress. And then a year later, it was almost like like, why else wouldn't I hitchhike? This seems to be the only logical way I can get home. Your brain
Exactly.
transforms, it's plastic, and it's remarkable that small actions can get you there. So I think if it is like a job uh, that you want to have, if it's a fear that you have always wanted to overcome, but for whatever reason things are holding you back, try a new thing every single week. Try a
Yeah.
new thing and realize like holy crap, I did something yesterday that scared me and it went fine. And then the following week you do something that scares you and then you realize, wait, that actually was fine. And then slowly over time you'll realize like moving jobs has scared me for a long time, but the last 5 times I did something that scared me, it was fine. So it's
Right.
training your brain, because I think for a lot of people it's hard to just say overcome your fear, because that's a big step. You're going from never having overcome any fear to trying to tackle this thing in your mind that's been massive. But just small things every day or every week tends to make you realize, oh wow, this was never that big of a deal to begin with. It's
Yeah.
the slight progression time after time. It's like practice. It's almost like you're
Well,
putting in fear reps. It's reps to overcome
yeah.
your fear, the same way that you would put in reps to overcome weight in the gym.
No, you're
Interesting.
absolutely right. And it's fear's not a bad thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we have it for a reason. It's a warning mechanism, like when we're in danger. Like, so it's okay to have fear. But it's good to understand like what drives it, and to understand like, all right, is my logical thinking fear based, and is it actually holding me back, or is it really trying to prevent me from danger? So it's really listening to that. What is that motivating factor behind the fear? What am I truly afraid of? What's the failure that I'm fearing here? Because at the end of the day, like, I'm just not really afraid of failure anymore.
Yeah.
I believe in risk and not being reckless. So
You trained
but
your brain though to
yeah, exactly, because
failure
you're
because you
creating.
failed. Because
Right,
you
you're
failed.
creating these new neural pathways
Yeah.
every time you take these different approaches and stretch yourself. And honestly, it's helped me in my own recovery with my health issues that I've had in the past. Like, stretching my brain and training it this way and growing it, because I've got a long history of concussions. So this is
Yeah.
actually, this type of work that I do is really healthy for my own wellness. So it's pretty wild experience. And so I totally support you in what you're saying. These small risks, you start off small and slowly you just start building up to it. I mean, everything that I'm doing has been years in the making,
Yeah.
but it doesn't take long to really
It doesn't.
get strong at this. Just like going to the gym, it doesn't take long to get back in the game and start creating some strength and some competency in this area.
It's interesting. There's been a few studies done that has shown the amount of hours it takes for you to actually accumulate a new skill and reach a certain level of proficiency that is pretty good. Like someone can
Hmm.
see you, for example, playing guitar, and they're like, okay, you're pretty good. It's around 30 hours.
Yeah.
But the thing is, 30 hours has to happen within a short amount of time. So
Hmm.
theoretically, if you did 1 hour of practice for a new skill every single day for a month, you get to this point where you're actually quite proficient. Now, people always think that mental fortitude is just like an attitude, but in reality it's actually a skill. If
Right.
you do something that's difficult for you that you don't want to do every single day for an hour in that month, that thing is going to get much easier. So if every single day you do something that you're afraid of, then by the
Yeah.
end of that month your interpretation of what makes you afraid is just totally different. And it's like, once again, it goes back to that brain plasticity, that of course jumping into a new job terrifying, but small things leading up to that job change will make that job change feel a lot easier. And if you really want to get prescriptive with it, there's this tactic that Tim Ferriss was talking about in his book, and he was talking about literally write down on a sheet of paper what is the absolute ideal that would come out of you taking this risk. What would be the best possible case scenario? And then you on the second column, look at what is the absolute worst case scenario. What if everything goes wrong if you make this decision? What would that look like to you? And then the third pillar, is that change permanent? If everything goes wrong, will that actually last you forever?
Yeah.
What ends up happening for most people is that they realize the absolute best case is that their life is totally transformed. The middle is that it's pretty bad, but it's not so bad. And ultimately, in the third pillar, they realize, wait, it's not irreversible. Let's say I quit this job and I start a new business, and that business tanks and I lose a bit of money. It's not as though I'm dead. Like, my family's still there. I can still get another job. I can still pay back my loans. That really doesn't impact me for too long of a time. And it helps you at least rationalize, oh, you know what? This can be done. I can deal with this. I can figure out how to work around this. The pros really outweigh the cons.
Right.
So I would say, like, a combination of thinking logically about really what are the ramifications, but also just taking action, small action every single day, because that'll just transform your brain to realize, wait, action's fun. Action is good. It makes me feel better. And every single time I take action, every little other stress just seems a little bit smaller. So I think that's really, really interesting. But it relates well to your story, because I agree, man. That exactly.
One of my favorite comments that people, the one that makes me think the most, people keep saying is, do it while you can.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Do it while you can. Because I keep asking this question. I'm like, well, when's my end date? Like, do you know, when is my end date on when I can't do this anymore? Like, you know, this whole RV thing. Well, you better do it now. And I do believe in that, but I don't like this idea, like, there's this limitation, this cap, that eventually you just can't do anything anymore in life.
Yeah.
And I believe that you'll always be able to do something, but there's this idea that do it while you can. Yeah, I definitely believe in the now and doing things, but man, I just don't see this limitation that you should ever put on your life where you can no longer take risks. Like, you can no longer take any more risks. You've reached a certain age, you know, you've got kids, and you now have to just live a certain way. And I've been an epic rule breaker for quite a long time. And I'm trying to break some of these social norms around things, around what you can and can't do. Because I really believe that boils down to an individual level.
Amazing. Amazing. I actually have to run off to another call now, but this has been absolutely wonderful. I'm going to try to, snip out a few interesting pieces, but I'll send you the uncut version as well what you want to do with it. But this has been fun. It's been good.
Man, I've had a blast, dude. Lloyd, we got to get you talking more about your business.
Yeah.
Like,
gotta do it.
When you took some time to speak, man, that's your time, dude. Jump in there and tie it in. Like, with my business, this is how we look at risk, So you've got something really cool that you're working on. So I know you got to run, but that's my encouragement for you. So if you ever want to do this again, let's really focus on you.
Okay, for sure.
And how you do that. Okay. All right, man.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks for pushing me to talk more about myself. Cause my interviews has always been about my guests, and I always like to get my guests out, but I'm still.
The last takeaway though, is this: it should be about your guests. And that's what I love about you too. It really should be. But even in the beginning of your call, talk about who you are, what's your business. At the end of the call, talk about your person, how to connect with them, and then also you and what you do one more time, and then end it.
Amazing.
So don't forget that. We'll talk more, okay, man?
Thank you. Cheers.
All right, bye-bye.